To better understand Ross's article, the resources he's referring to need to be defined, as well as the groups involved. Lootable resources are those resources that can be easily appropriated by individuals or small groups of unskilled workers. And they would generally the resources talked about are diamonds and drugs specifically. An unlootable resource are those resources that need skilled workers and technicians to collect, like drilling for oil, natural gas, and deep shaft minerals. Now, the groups that are involved are the separatist group, the group of people who want to form a new country that is separate from the one they are in now, focusing on the established government. And a non-separatist group are those groups whose intentions are to promote a certain religious or ideological agenda with no attachment to a certain state or government. Ross presents four main arguments that are later broken down into 7 hypotheses on the resources and Civil War. First argument is resources have sharply different effects in separatist conflicts compared to non-separatist conflicts. The impact of a particular resource depends on whether or not it is lootable, i.e. it easily appropriated by unskilled workers. Lootable resources are more likely to ignite non-separatist conflicts, which once begun are harder to resolve, but pose little danger of igniting separatist conflicts. And unlootable resources tend to produce separatist conflicts, but seldom influence non-separatist conflicts. These are the 7 hypotheses that Ross developed about the ways that natural resources tend to influence civil wars. They suggest that the resource plays the biggest role depending on its lootability, obstructability, and its legality. So what does it all mean? It means power and control. One of Ross' hypotheses states, quote, the more unlootable a resource is, the more likely it will lead to separatist conflicts, end quote. He mentions that the distribution of the wealth from the unlootable resource creates or complicates the conflict. A prime example is the conflict in the Sudan. Since the discovery of oil in South Sudan in 1978, the conflict between the North and the South has raged on. When South Sudan achieved independence from the North, they had an abundance of oil and aid money, but failed to capitalize on it. That income was South Sudan's only source of domestic income, and the civil wars continued because each side wants control. Recently, it has been discovered that oil could be classified as a lootable resource. This past September, the Houston Chronicle reported that the Islamic State group is financing its terrorist actions by selling oil from wells they had seized in Iraq and Syria, raising an estimated $3 million a day. Rudimentary means of piping the oil from the oil fields to barrels and smuggling the barrels in unlit tugs show the ingenuity and ambition of a non-separatist group that sees the potential cash revenue for an unlootable resource and makes it more difficult to stop their progression. One of Ross's 7 hypotheses state, quote, if the resource is illegal, it is more likely to benefit the rebels, unless the government is willing to endure international sanction, end quote. This rings true in Afghanistan. Kathleen Calderwood of International Business Times on October 29, 2014 reported that Afghanistan produces 80% of the world's opium supply, generating $3 billion in revenue for the Taliban and other non-separatist groups. She quotes John F. Sopko, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan's reconstruction, when he wrote a letter to Secretary of State John Kerry. He said, quote, while the farmers themselves earn an incredibly tiny portion of the proceeds from growing opium, it is still one of the better sources of income around. An example of a lootable resource that is used to fund government was highlighted by the charges, trial, and conviction of Charles Taylor, then president of Liberia, used his influence to have uncut diamonds smuggled to him in exchange for funding a civil war. In 2012, he was convicted of supporting rebels in neighboring Sierra Leone as they forced civilians into slavery for the benefits of cultivating the lootable resource of diamonds, and he is currently serving a 50-year sentence. The conviction brought to light the atrocities of what was coined, quote, blood diamonds, referring to the diamonds being illegally traded to fund conflicts. An agreement between the United Nations, the European Union, 74 other countries, and the World Diamond Council was established to identify blood diamonds and prevent their sale in an effort to stop the profits of their sale. Ross's hypotheses provide a clear understanding of how natural resources influence civil war, either by separatist groups wanting to create their own government or the terrorist group wanting to advance their cause, through the clinical description of the numbers that prove them. What must not be lost in all of the statistics and data collected are the true victims of these civil wars. Pictured on the left are a father and son who are panning for diamonds in Africa, backbreaking work day in and day out, with the hopes of creating a better way of living for themselves and their children, while fearing if they will be beaten, mutilated, or killed. On the right are children harvesting the raw opium after it is dried on the scored poppy pods. While they are harvesting that opium, they will put some of that tar-like substance between their cheek and gum to obtain that high. When they get older, they will resort to injecting the heroin directly into their veins to achieve the immediate high. So when you see a news story about a civil war in Africa, or how the Islamic State fought a hard battle in Iraq and Syria, think of the true victims of why the conflicts occur.